In the sacred pool of nectar, the Sikhs we saw came to bathe as Muslims going to Mecca to achieve merit. Sikhism is newer than Islam or Hinduism or Christianity. A guru began it less than 500 years ago. He and the gurus that followed him wrote the holy book and made the rules. Today, there are no gurus. The Sikhs don't have castes or complicated dietary laws or sacred cows or idols. In India, they have been known as warriors and businessmen and technicians. But they are not satisfied. The temple is in the city of Amritsar, in the Punjab, a state lying in the north of India near the Pakistan border. It looks like the rest of the Punjab. It is prosperous, and it is the Sikh stronghold. The Sikhs feel they have not gotten a fair share of Punjab progress, and they kept asking the government to do something about it. They are only 15 million out of India's 700 million, so nothing happened. Because they were dissatisfied, the militants among them turned the Golden Temple into a sanctuary of armed rebellion. When we were there 3 weeks ago, there were few signs of the coming explosion. A few visible soldiers and desultory checkpoints. But the thousands of the faithful still came to the temple, and anyone willing to put on a hat, take off his shoes and socks, and leave his cigarettes outside, anyone could go in, as we did. Inside, we saw the guerrillas, the rebels. You could tell them from the pilgrim visitors because they were armed, heavily armed. They were the residents of the sanctuary, hundreds of them. They couldn't leave openly because they were all wanted men. But they could and did slip out and back in to commit assassinations and arson and other violence. They were alert and armed, but we got the feeling they were sure they were safe. Breaking into the temple would be like the Italian army raiding St. Peter's to arrest a dissident cardinal. We were all wrong. Where did the arms come from? Perhaps from Pakistan, some by barter. Indian whiskey for the illegal drinkers of Pakistan in exchange for guns and ammunition. This is the religious heart of a temple inhabited by men with guns. But while the militants are a minority, the Golden Temple is sacred to all Sikhs. And if government should move against the temple by force, most Sikhs would become militants. That was the fear that kept the Indian government indecisive until last week. But this man always knew he was in danger. He was right. He died early in the fight. He had been in the temple for 2 years, under security within security. But he was always accessible to his followers. The nearest thing the Sikh rebellion had to an Ayatollah Khomeini. Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, 38 when he was killed. If he had been an American pastor, he would have been a fundamentalist. He hated the successful urban Sikhs who trim their beards and wear two-piece suits. The poor and the illiterate loved him, brought him what rupees they could spare. He spoke openly of the deaths and violence his followers had caused. These were not murders, he said, but justice. And, if necessary, the Sikhs would set up their own state and, the government feared, start the disintegration of India as a federal nation. We found him at a midday audience. You want to talk, he said? Sit down and we'll talk. The camera and I had become part of the show. If I were to tell Americans very briefly what you want, what should I say? What do you want?
ਜੇ ਮੈਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਸੰਖੇਪ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਕਵਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਗਲੋਂ ਗੁਲਾਮੀ ਲਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ We want, said the priest, to bring an end to the slavery which has been put around the necks of the Sikhs.
Some people, even some Sikhs, say that this is not a religious movement but a political movement. Is that partly true?
ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਲਹਿਰ ਆ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਆ ਇਹ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਆ ਕੀ ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਝੂਠ ਹੈ
Bhindranwale said that observation was totally wrong for a paradoxical reason. In Sikhism, he said, religion and politics are inseparable from each other.
In Sikhism,
do you see any comparison at all between yourself and Khomeini?
ਜੀ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਵੇਂ ਖਮੇਨੀ ਬਣੋਗੇ।
He either misunderstood or hedged. He couldn't be a Khomeini, he said, because he is a Sikh and a servant of the Sikhs. And in Sikhism, he said, nothing is irrational. A Sikh is never an oppressor, but only defends himself and his people. I have never, he said, initiated any attack with my tongue or my pen or with my sword. I only answer back or retaliate, he said, to actions initiated by the enemies of the Sikhs. Not all the Sikhs we saw were militants. A more moderate group chose the old Gandhi method of nonviolence. By the hundreds, they turned themselves into the police to plead guilty to real or imagined offenses, to clog the jails and clog the already clogged Indian bureaucracy. Typically, the police turned them loose in a few days. But they were at least willing to negotiate, and there were some signs the government might be moving in that direction. These nonviolent protesters are led by another Sikh priest who doesn't have much use for Bhindranwale. He's the president of the Sikh political party. He lived 100 yards across the Nectar Pool from Bhindranwale. He is Harchand Singh Longowal. He was wanted on relatively minor charges. When the government moved in last Wednesday, he surrendered, perhaps by prearrangement. Sir, a lot of outsiders are wondering what's going on here in the Golden Temple. One report that we read said that you do not get along with the other leader in the temple, the other more militant leader. Is that true?
Sanji says, when we feel the need to meet, then we meet.
Does that happen very often, sir?
Sanji says, when the need arises, we meet.
But it has not happened recently.
Sanji says that we don't feel the need to meet.
What would happen if the central government broke into the Golden Temple and took some people that they wanted? What would happen? Even though he was a moderate, Longowal shared one sentiment with every Sikh we talked to. Armed entry into the temple by government troops would make everything worse. Harmadir Singh Sandhu is one of the militants the Indian Army was looking for when the troops broke into the temple. He was one of the principal lieutenants of the extremist leader, Bhindranwale. We've been told that he survived the attack and is now a prisoner of the Indian Army. Whether or not he gave up voluntarily, we don't know. But when we talked to him, he didn't sound like a man who would give up easily.
We are slaves in India. We can't lead any aspect of life like an independent citizen. That's why we are struggling for our rights. This is happening with most of the Sikhs. No doubt, if I am married, I will have to stay here for the cause of the nation. I can spend whole of my life here, and even we both, me and my wife, we can go out fighting if it is decided by our organization. So I don't mind it staying here for the cause of the Sikhs. If we get liberation out of these sufferings, that will be something, a big achievement for we people.
Do you think you will ever get out of here without using a gun?
It will depend upon the behavior of the Indian government. We don't want bloodshed and violence. We want to settle the issues in a peaceful way, but the government doesn't want it. Certainly this is a struggle for sovereignty of the Sikhs. Sikhs want to keep their culture, their identity secure. And if the government doesn't accept it, certainly the Sikhs will have to take up arms. And this will not be a smaller war. Mrs. Gandhi and the Indian government, they will have to suffer too much for that.
The Indian government says that struggle for sovereignty has ended, that the minority rebel movement has a broken back. But the trouble everyone predicted began immediately after the army went into the temple. There was fighting in New Delhi and other cities. No one knows for sure what's happening in the Sikh stronghold of Amritsar, because only government reports are coming from there. The question is, what happens now to the great majority of Sikhs, who are doing pretty well, who are the backbone of much of India's agricultural technology and other advanced occupations? Before the break into the temple, they were distinctly not in sympathy with the rebels.